I remember that's when I decided for myself that I didn't want to be a minister because I felt so sorry for him that he was still at work while we were already leaving at 3 in the morning.
What do you think this is more about? Ambition, an internal crisis, or a search for meaning? This decision of yours. What real human pain is your company actually trying to solve by creating BrainPatch?
We are trying to help people cope with stress. After 3 minutes of using your device, I feel as if I had meditated for half an hour. The device helps reduce staff turnover because it prevents burnout in the workplace. There's so much blood, so much sweat, so many tears here.
Good afternoon, you are watching a podcast about mental health, and with you today, your host is Dinara Gaplan. The first episode is in 2026. We begin with a conversation about what is happening to people's mental health in the world, overload, and what new technologies besides traditional methods are emerging to support us people. Today in our studio, we have Dauren Toleukhanov, entrepreneur, former diplomat, and co-founder of the Neurotechnology startup BrainPatch in the UK.
Hello, Dinara. Thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast.
I'm very glad to see you, Dauren. Actually, we've known each other for a very long time, for many years. The first question I'd like to ask you is about your story. In your interview with Digital Business in 2004, which you gave, you talked quite a lot about your life experience because you have extensive experience in government institutions and you have significant diplomatic experience. Work in the Chancellery. You worked for the Prime Minister, you opened and worked in the quasi-public sector, you opened and worked at the National Welfare Fund's representative office. So tell me, how and why did you suddenly decide to leave, roughly speaking, that path, that story, where you basically had the opportunity to build a good career, either as a statesman or a diplomat, right? Why, how come? Did you leave specifically for this story?
Thank you very much. That's a good question. Actually, I think that as a diplomat, well, at least for myself, I consider that I was quite successful in that career. Basically, in terms of diplomatic ranks, I have the rank of first-class counselor. The next ranks are only awarded by the president.
But your dream, in that same interview with Digital Business,
You
talked about your dream that you wanted to become the Minister of Foreign Affairs. What happened to that dream?
I wanted to become the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I wanted that back in 3rd grade at school. In fact, after I worked for a year at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by the way, speaking of mental health, stress, and so on, I remember once we were preparing for a presidential visit and working very intensely without any days off. We would leave work at 3 a.m. and come back by 8. I remember once we were leaving with our department head at 3 in the morning, actually, walking down the street, and we saw that the minister's office light was still on. So, in other words, the minister was still at work. At that time, the minister was Erlan Idrisov. I remember that's when I decided for myself that I didn't want to be a minister, because I felt so sorry for him still sitting at work while we were already leaving. We left work at 3 in the morning.
So that was kind of a turning point when you realized that you definitely didn't want to be a minister.
A bad soldier is one who doesn't dream of becoming a general. But ministers are special people, of course. Well,
Okay, but still, you could have built a good career in the quasi-public sector. You worked in the Prime Minister's office. Why? Why did you decide to leave?
that's it, your career, everything worked out, in my opinion. That is everything I wanted to achieve, to prove something to someone, to show that I can, that I am capable, and so on. All of that was accomplished. Well, I wanted to make independent decisions, let's put it that way. I wanted to manage my own destiny.
And how old were you then?
When?
When you decided to leave, your last place of work was...
In 2018, how old was I then? It turns out 42 years old. 42 years old, yes. Not quite the age of Christ. And
What do you think it's mostly about? Is it about ambition, an internal crisis, or a search for meaning? This decision of yours.
no, I honestly didn't experience any kind of personal crisis at all. I just wanted to do something significant, something that, let's put it this way. I apologize. It's just that I lived in the UK for 20 years, and at one time I went to school there. In the US as well, I studied at a university there as part of an exchange program, and that's why sometimes I have to translate from English. Right now, I'm trying to translate the word intact, contribution. Contribution, right? All right, let's go with contribution. Contribution.
Reward legacy.
I wanted, yes, to make my own contribution, so to speak, to human culture, including technological culture. That is, I came to understand that humanity is under constant stress and that it is possible to help. And thanks to my friend, who is a neuroscientist and inventor, we decided to create such a company and to give everyone the opportunity to improve their cognitive abilities, to become less emotional and more rational, to perceive stress more calmly, and to cope with stress better.
Listen, what you're saying is a bit abstract. When you talk about realizing that humanity is experiencing stress, if we go back to your personal experience, what was happening with you, perhaps at the moment of transition or when the idea for this startup was born, right? Maybe something was happening to you that you realized that neither discipline nor vacation nor willpower was helping you. So why exactly?
Things were different there.
Situation. If we speak more personally and not in the context of humanity.
If we talk in a personal context, the situation was that my mother became very ill and I had to take care of her. And I realized that I wouldn't be able to do that while working in public service or deal with these matters in a quasi-government job. That is, I needed to be physically present next to her. So basically, I left my job and, left the quasi-public sector, yes. And 3 months later, we started our own company and began to develop it. So yes, it was honestly quite a significant shock, emotionally speaking.
So you could say that your mother's illness, at that time, it was the main key driver of your transition from the quasi-public sector and into the neurotech industry. Well,
yes, I would definitely associate it with that the most. But in principle, I was already mentally prepared to do something of my own as well.
If you take away the technology and terminology, what real human pain is your company actually trying to solve by creating BrainPatch?
We are trying to help people cope with stress very quickly and effectively. Basically, our device helps a person relieve stress in literally 1 or 2 minutes. The person feels refreshed and more focused. We have a wonderful person, one of our investors, Adil Nurgojin, and he told us that at one time he practiced meditation, studied meditation, and even went to Sadhguru's ashram. And when he tried our device, he said, "Guys, it's a very interesting sensation after using your device for 3 minutes. I feel as if I had meditated for half an hour." So it's also a kind of time saver. That is, for people who really meditate, it's not always possible to do so at work when you're surrounded by people in an office environment, because meditation still requires solitude, tranquility, and peace, so that no one disturbs you. But how can we make this meditation accessible to people who don't know how to meditate, or who do know how but are, for example, at their workplace? So we basically created a device called e-meditation. This is our first device. It's our flagship. Last year we launched sales.
So is BrainPatch and e-meditation the same thing, or is e-meditation an app for BrainPatch? Because there are the headphones themselves, right?
Well, BrainPatch is the name of our company. It's kind of let's just say, for example, it is some classic programmer humor. So in programmer slang, there's the word patch, then which means upgrade or firmware or improvement. And we called the product e-meditation because we had to name it somehow. And all the good names were already taken. I'm joking.
How often do you actually use this product yourself?
Quite often. For example, yesterday I used it several times throughout the day. There was a really funny situation. We have an office at Astana Hub. We recently became residents of Astana Hub. And we put up announcements all over Astana Hub saying that all the startups located there can come and try it out. It's absolutely free for Astana Hub employees as well. And we have a constant stream of people there. Well, since I don't often visit the Astana office specifically, so I was really interested to see what was happening. People would come in and naturally they would introduce me as the co-founder, so I had to start conversations with everyone and also demonstrate our device. By the way, just yesterday we made a sale, a rather amusing one. So startups are also buying this device either to give it as a gift to someone or to use it themselves. We have HR managers from these startups coming in and they are already buying it for their companies. For their valued employees, this is crucial because this specific device also helps. And right now, I know it sounds a bit like a commercial advertisement, to be honest, but the device truly helps to significantly reduce staff turnover. And since it effectively helps prevent burnout in the modern workplace, overall employee productivity also improves quite substantially as a direct result of these changes.
We'll come back to these studies later. There is actually a question on this topic coming up. Where exactly do you think the boundaries are drawn between genuine neuroscience and the world of marketing hype?
Neuro. Well, nowadays the word neuro is used a lot in the context of neural networks and artificial intelligence. We are going a little from the other side, from the physiological side. That is, it is still more about biology, biochemistry, and the organism. Advertising is the engine of commerce, yes.
But
At the same time,
this is a non-invasive method.
yes, but what we are doing is truly a non-invasive method. When my partner Nikolai and I were starting the company, we discussed which path to take. And naturally, we had the example of Elon Musk in mind, chip implantation, and so on.
Merlin?
Yes, we didn't want to go down that path. We truly believe it is possible to create wearable gadgets that people can use in their everyday lives.
Dauren, today, every 8th person in the world faces mental challenges, mental diagnoses, or disorders. Kazakhstan is no exception. Unfortunately, in this statistic, we are actually among the outsiders. If we look at the situation in Kazakhstan, especially when it comes to mental health, in the US and the West, there has been something of a boom in psychotherapy. Overall, the development of mental health awareness happened, in my opinion, somewhere in the 1990s, but in Kazakhstan, stigmatization continues. Many people still find it very difficult to seek psychological help due to a variety of mental and cultural factors. Devices such as these ones, yes, such as meditation, the innovative product that your company has developed, in your opinion, can they truly replace more traditional and established approaches? Or are they more of an additional tool that helps people with certain needs, or those facing specific challenges and difficulties specifically related to their mental health?
Well, that's a wonderful question. Thank you very much. In general terms, indeed, following the global pandemic and its many lasting consequences, humanity as a whole is currently experiencing what is widely referred to as long COVID. And individuals in our modern society are constantly facing various complex mental health challenges and struggles. I don't think I can give a single definite answer here, and I'll provide a detailed explanation regarding the reasons why we created our device not as a strictly regulated medical diagnostic tool, but to make it as accessible as possible for anyone. But accordingly, when it comes to promotion, we cannot position it as a medical device. And we say that this is a device for restoring inner balance, in other words, things that are not medical. But we have shown this device to various colleagues from the medical sector. In particular, in 2020, we received a grant from the British government specifically to work with COVID hospitals. And the idea there was that it was still experimental at that point. It was still just at that time we only had the portable version, and the idea was that we could use this device to reduce anxiety in COVID patients. As a result, their immunity would improve, and accordingly their chances of survival would increase. And it turned out quite interestingly that these devices were in very high demand among doctors and nurses.
Because they were the ones bearing the main burden.
Yes. And what happened was they actually said, please, could you go ahead and register this as a medical device? If you do that, then we'll be able to use it in our work officially and properly.
Why didn't you go down that path?
Because it's very capital intensive on the one hand. But on the other hand, actually, you could say that we did go down that path, just not directly, but rather, let's say, indirectly. That is, we provide licenses to certain companies. These companies, some of them are medical device manufacturers, and they are now present in various markets like Kazakhstan and other countries. I won't specify exactly for now because the work is still ongoing. It's not finished yet, so it's a bit early to talk about it. But I think that within the next year or two, we will obtain registration. They are called RU, registration certificates, something like that, yes. So this registration confirms that it is a medical device. And from our colleagues, from medical professionals, we hear that these devices can help in certain cases of depression, that is, help people cope. They help those who have depression and anxiety to manage their conditions. But we can't talk about that specifically in our advertising campaign because until you receive the status of a medical device, anything related to medical use, you are not allowed to talk about it. In
your interview, you mentioned that the studies you conducted were single-blind and especially double-blind, a blind placebo-controlled study. In fact, this is the gold standard for such products. Not all neuro startups reach this level. So, if we talk in more detail about the studies behind BrainPatch, what in your product has truly been proven and what do you honestly call an experiment? Because when it comes to mental health and the shortage of specialists, any technology that works with the psyche requires special responsibility.
Yes, I agree. But I also really wanted to take a moment to mention my co-founder, Nikolai, because he actually holds a PhD in neuroscience. He's a highly skilled professional neurobiologist and has dedicated his entire long-standing scientific career specifically to this complex field. Nikolai really loves to experiment, and he especially loves to experiment on himself first because, as a proper scientist, that's what he should do. But of course, sometimes we end up being his guinea pigs. Naturally, this is all on a voluntary basis since we trust him and understand that he wouldn't do anything that doesn't comply with the permissions of the ethics committee, for example, of one university or another. And so Nikolai discovered that if you stimulate certain areas on the head in a specific way, you can achieve some very, very interesting effects. For example, he was able to relieve his own migraine pain. There are certain algorithms that can also be activated using our device. They help people with insomnia fall asleep more easily.
So, if we return to the question of research, Dauren, what studies have been conducted? Perhaps you have some data? Maybe the number of participants, where were they conducted? Were they conducted in Kazakhstan, the UK? How many people took part?
That really is interesting.
Yes?
All right. I'll answer a bit evasively, but then I'll explain why I'm being evasive, because actually there is a lot of this data because we've conducted research both in the UK and at one time before the active phase of the war in Ukraine began. Furthermore, we have established extensive international collaborations once again. We are actively engaging in deep scientific cooperation with brilliant researchers and experts from all across the globe. Our diverse team includes partners from Australia, we have colleagues from Kyrgyzstan, there are specialists from Russia, researchers from the United States, and many other nations as well. So there are a lot of different studies and all the results are available. All of them are published in scientific journals, and everything is available on the BrainPatch page in the science section. So if anyone wants to read all the statistics and so on, that's where I'll be directing them. I can briefly tell you in a few words about what we have done in Kazakhstan, who we work with, and what we do. In Kazakhstan, we are especially active in working with the Department of Research and Science at Al-Farabi Kazakh National University. By the way, the stand of this department, which presents our joint work, was once visited by the President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Kemaluli Tokayev. He was told specifically about the work we were doing about our scientific research. We also work closely with the Brain Institute, as well as with the Asfendiarov Kazakh National Medical University in Kazakhstan. Furthermore, we collaborate closely with the Kazakh British Technical University as well. So, in other words, a lot of work is being done, and we are making every effort. The results of our work are published in very prestigious scientific journals, which are called peer-reviewed, where the results of our research are questioned, so to speak, in a positive way by colleagues from neuroscience. That is, they look at the results and say, I believe it. Or, for example, they might say, it doesn't really seem possible. Well, of course, that doesn't really happen with us because, again, we have several neuroscience professors on our advisory board, so our company is very, very scientific. And I don't know, probably the least scientific person here is me.
I see.
All right.
Now, the very next question that I would really like to discuss with you today is actually something that both you and your co-founder have frequently mentioned. during several of your recent public interviews. It's about how meditation serves as a means of preventing emotional burnout. Still, not for treating depression, because clinical depression is a rather complex issue and it always requires the help of a psychiatrist. Especially now, as I sit here talking to you, I am a psychotherapist in training. And in my opinion, BrainPatch and meditation are, above all, additional support for people who want to cope with stress. For those who want to save their time and quickly enter a resourceful state. That's how I see it.
That's correct. Absolutely correct. And
so what do you think? Could there be a proper place for such devices in the mental health care system? For example, as you mentioned in your case in the UK, it turned out that the device was actually in demand, specifically among doctors during COVID, because these are people who were facing extremely high risks and levels of stress, and they were working for hours, days on end, without rest. It's clear to me, this is about emotional burnout. Where else, so to speak, could such a device find its place?
Well, actually, I think that this device is very versatile since you can use it at work, you can use it at home, because sometimes psychologically difficult situations arise specifically within the family, for example, right? And you can also use it on public transport. For example, when you're traveling from one meeting to another, say you're preparing for a meeting and you feel that you've gotten too nervous, right? You just use it to calm yourself down. And
can you share a real case where, in a particularly difficult family situation, it actually helped you?
In a family situation?
Yes.
Well, I can't say that it directly helped in that situation, but I'll just share this case. I was doing a demonstration of our devices in Cambridge, where our headquarters is located. It was for our company, and I was presenting to other startup founders like myself. So there were about 20 people in the audience, and I had to show, demonstrate, and explain the device to each of them, of course, before letting them try it themselves. First, I would put it on myself, start it up, make sure everything was working, and then show it to them. Then when I came home in the evening, my wife said to me, "You seem a bit unusual today." I asked her, "What's wrong?" She said, well, you're usually so lively and energetic, but now you seem so calm in a kind of Zen state and so on." Very calm. So she definitely noticed the difference, right? I don't know whether it actually helped us out or not, but it was a funny situation. I can tell you about another case where it helped in the family of one of my friends. He asked me if I could sell him our device. I started jokingly telling him that under no circumstances would I sell him anything. He said, no, you don't understand. It's not for me, it's for my daughter. I asked, what's going on? We're friends with their family, so I know them. And he said, well, here's the situation. She got into university and moved out of the house. Now she lives in another city and she ran into a problem. She started having trouble focusing her attention. Because of this, her anxiety increased. She started having trouble falling asleep and wasn't getting enough rest. Naturally, this affected her studies and her academic performance, so they decided to consult psychotherapists. So the doctors prescribed her some very serious medications, and that's what he was telling me about. Sushi, I'm sorry, but our device isn't intended for those purposes. To be perfectly clear, we offer this strictly as a preventive measure. It is not intended to be used as a medical treatment or a clinical therapy, so I am afraid I cannot help you with those specific needs or sell it to you for that purpose. However, what I can do for you is the following. I will let you take this device home and use it for a full 2 weeks to see the benefits for yourself. If it helps her, I don't want to know anything about it. I know nothing. She's already over 18. She's capable of making her own decisions. It's up to you.
Did she continue her medication therapy? Or did she...
I don't know. Yes, I mean, there are some details I don't know, but I want to say the following. 2 weeks passed and the device, it helped her a lot, and she came to me to thank me. She said, thank you. My sleep has returned to normal. And 5 minutes before I started doing my homework, I would put it on. The device received stimulation, and then I could calmly concentrate on studying for 2 hours, and overall, the results were very good. What I wanted to say is that all of this happened 3 years ago. Last year, she graduated from university with honors, and I believe that we played a part in that. That's the reality.
I've actually read a lot of reviews. You have a lot of them in your materials, publications, and in the interviews you give.
Where other people say, yes, it's good.
In fact, there's a lot of positive feedback. Where do you draw the ethical line when it comes to influencing the brain? And what is it that you definitely don't want people to do with your product?
That's an interesting question. I've never really thought about the second question, but as for the first one, ethics, I believe, ultimately comes down to the fact that any medical intervention carried out should, in my opinion, be strictly governed by the primary principle of medicine. That is, first, do no harm. That is the very first thing to consider. There should be absolutely no harm caused. It must be safe, and it must be entirely reliable for the patient. By the way, in this regard, when we were designing this device, we were already thinking ahead, imagining that one day our company would become a medical device manufacturer, reach that level, and that even now at the planning and engineering stage, in the schematics and so on, I mean the microchips, we needed to take into account all the safety parameters that exist in the European Union. And so we actually comply with all these standards. We meet the requirements for so-called Class 2 medical devices. That is, we are not officially a medical device, but even at the assembly stage. For example, the company that assembles our devices in the UK, it's a family business that was actually acquired last year by a financial industrial group from Cambridge, by the way. They have licenses and co-standards for medical devices. That is, for many other companies that assemble actual medical devices, they provide this service at their factory.
So, as a matter of fact, are you fully prepared and ready to be classified as a medical product today? Yes, I am.
We are preparing.
What do you feel when you hold this in your hands? This is a product you created.
You
had a certain period in your life, up to 42 years old, right? Where you were involved in something completely different, you could say, right? A different story. And then you move into a neurotech startup and create this gadget.
But I would still say that, in fact, I didn't create it. Nikolai did. Of course, the whole team worked on it. We all work on...
Nikolai, you are the co-founder, right?
Yes, but he is the inventor, so this is his brainchild.
Well, but you all made it together after all. You probably created it together.